quite often what Henry Kissinger said, which was maybe a warning to the world, but I think it was more of a call to arms on their side. So he said, if you control the food, you control the people. If you control the energy, you control the continent. If you control the money, you control the world. In 2008, I got hammered. In 2008, like everybody, I was really good at making money, but I didn't understand this financial system. Like, what the heck just happened to me? And
WTF.
The enemy, the evil guy, was Thanos, and he came up with this theory where he had to kill half the world in order to save half the world, right? We had to get rid of half the population. So it was kill half the world to actually save the world. And I feel that's where they are at. They feel that this is a necessary sacrifice, and they're telling us as much. I mean, the Secretary of the Energy for the United States is on TV telling people, we get it, gas prices are expensive, you can't afford to drive, but it's necessary. I made a lot of money. I built two businesses, one in an internet business out of the dot-com boom, or bust, I should say, one medical business. In 2008, I got hammered. In 2008, like everybody, I was really good at making money, but I didn't understand this financial system. Like, what the heck just happened to me? And
WTF.
Exactly. WTF happened to me. I was good at making money, but I didn't realize there was these forces that had control over my life that I wasn't really paying attention to.
The macro.
And so for the last 12 years, I've studied the macro. I learned a concept called wealth transfers. Money doesn't disappear, it transfers. And so when I lost my wealth, somebody else got that. I didn't like that.
That's a very good point.
I didn't like that. And so
that's happening today.
And it's happening today. And so I realized there's certain times and conditions where these wealth transfers happen. And so I've spent the last 12 years studying these wealth transfers to figure out, how do I get on the receiving end instead of being on the receiving end of those things?
The world right now.
So let's talk about, what is WEF anyway?
Well, first off, what's WTF?
That's really the most accurate statement.
I say that because there's a cool website by a couple buddies I have. It's called WTFhappened in1971.com.
Right, that's a good one.
You've seen that, right?
No.
Okay,
I agree.
All it is just a bunch of charts. So it's a web page, WTF happened 1971, and all it is charts. And it shows since 1971 what's happened with the income inequality, the obesity rate, the incarceration rate, the divorce rate, the medium income, debt levels, everything since 1971. Why since 1971? It's the year we got off the gold standard. So you can see, it's 100 charts that show what the WTF happened in 1971, and you can see it's just like crazy.
What's the name of this book?
It's a website. WTF happened in 1971.
Good,
and the reason why I start with that, which you said WTF, is because when was the World Economic Forum founded?
1971.
Oh, wow.
Is that true?
WTF happened in 1971.
Wow.
And so the whole world went off the rails in 1971. When you distort the money, you get all types of distortions. And one of those is seen like a WTF, a WEF.
Well, the good news is, I got mine because it was in 1972 I realized what had happened. I was flying in Vietnam, and that's when I went on the gold standard. And I bought my first little Krugerrand in Hong Kong for about $50.
Well, no, you never left the gold standard. See, the dollar left the gold standard.
Yeah,
you just jumped back.
We didn't.
It was good news for me.
So, Mark, a lot of people don't know who Klaus Schwab is or WEF. Can you just give us a little history on that?
Yeah, so a lot of people might have heard of something like Davos, where every year the world leaders, a lot of people call them the world elite. I don't like to use that word. They're not elite in anything. None of us would hire them in our business, but the world leaders, the policy makers, if you will, the think tankers, they get together every year in Davos, and so you hear like the Davos man in reference or something. And
it's politicians, it's business leaders, all of that.
It's both, because what their policy is this public-private partnership. Public-private partnership. That's this whole thing.
Public-private, okay.
So it's politicians and business people getting together, public and private, getting together to set policy. So they get together every year in Davos, Switzerland, at the World Economic Forum. And so it was founded by this guy, Klaus Schwab, who he's a German. His father has deep ties into Nazi Germany, obviously. There's deep ties there. He studied under Henry Kissinger, and he's created this think tank, bringing these people together to try to figure out a better way, a more equitable way to run the world. Watch out. Anytime you see that word equitable, you know what they're talking about. They're talking about Marxism. And so what he's done is he's just taken the same ideas. You said we haven't seen this before, but of course we have. It's the same ideas being rehashed. And so it's globally. And so it's just Marxism all over. So they get the world leaders together, the politicians, the public, and the private, and they come together in what he's calling stakeholder capitalism. Stakeholder capitalism. So instead of, we talked about last night at dinner how Rothbard said that businesses should focus on profit. He says, no, business shouldn't focus on profit. Business should focus on the community, ESG, environmental, social, governance. We should be equitable. And so basically distorted all these things, but they want to do it through power, through control, forcing people to comply instead of educating people and showing people better ways. And so they've done it through the public-private partnership. So basically through the money. So now if you don't fall in line with what their policies are, no money for you, no investment for you, right? And if these big companies don't follow along with their policies and push these things down, they don't get the funding, and then they basically get pushed out of the.
So let's step back a little bit. So who is Mark Moss? How do you know?
I reference quite often what Henry Kissinger said, which was maybe a warning to the world, but I think it was more of a call to arms on their side. So he said, if you control the food, you control the people. If you control the energy, you control the continent. If you control the money, you control the world.
And let's back up. A lot of people don't know who Kissinger was. Oh, he's still around. He's still alive.
He's still alive. Yeah, he's still alive.
Who was he?
He's pretty old. Well, he's Secretary of State, right?
For Nixon.
Yeah. So he
opened the door to China.
Opened the door to China, but also, instrumental throughout Europe as well during that time of the, coming out of the World War II, kind of redrawing the world and setting peace and stuff like that. So he was very influential, and he still is today, right?
And he was teaching at, was it MIT or Yale or one of the big universities is where Klaus Schwab met him and studied under him.
That's right. So Klaus Schwab studied under him. I forget which university it was, but he studied under him, and so he's carried on these same philosophies. Yeah. And I think, people say, "Oh, you're cherry picking data." Well, really, like, what are the attack vectors today? So food, we're running out of food. Per the UN, they say 868 million people could starve to death in the next 24 months.
Well, you look at what's happening in Sri Lanka today.
Yeah.
There's rioting going on and all this because it's corruption. And basic corruption is what it is, but they're starving.
Yeah, they're starving.
And the Ukraine is going to starve a lot of people.
They're starving, and they have no energy. And so
the whole Green New Deal is killing our energy.
So Sri Lanka has the best ESG score in the world, 98 out of 100.
Great, yay! Yeah. They passed the test.
Yeah,
just like school. It means nothing.
They had put out an article 2 years ago, said that by 2025, they were going to be one of the richest nations. They were going to be the poster child for ESG. And it was on the WF website.
ESG stands for?
Environmental, social, and governance. So they'd give you a score based off of these three metrics, how environmentally sound you are, environmentally low impact on environment, your social score, and then your governance. Do you have diversity on your board and all of these things? And so they were going to be the poster child for this. They proclaimed that we will be the best by 2025. They said by 2025 we'll be one of the richest nations in the world based off of this sustainability.
Sri Lanka coming apart at the seams right now.
Well, no, they're completely gone. Yeah, they defaulted on their bonds. They got no money. Nobody will loan them any more money. They don't have any money to import any energy, so they have no energy.
So they went the path that the Great Reset is all about, and they're gone. That should say something.
So who? Let me ask this: who came up with ESG? Do you know?
I'm not exactly sure who started ESG. It came out of the WEF, the WEF, we'll call it, the WEF camp, and it came out of that. It's just a way to control people.
Food. What's happening? So we talked about Sri Lanka. Yeah. What's happening in Europe?
Yeah, so let's talk about food. So the food is the first attack vector. So I was on Fox Business 2 weeks ago. They asked me about an article the UN put out, and the UN titled the article, "Why It's Good to Be Hungry." Why being hungry is good. And they were saying we need people to be starving because there's all these jobs that have to be done that nobody would do unless they were starving.
Who said that?
It was an article on the UN website.
Wow.
And like I said, Fox had me on to talk about it. They took it down after half a day because the backlash was so insane. But per the UN, about 868 million people could starve to death in the next 24 months, almost 1 billion. So
in the next 24 months?
Yeah. And so at a time, so Marxism, whenever Marxism has been tried in Russia in the early 1900s, about 25 million people starved to death. In Mao's Great Leap Forward, about 50 million people starved to death. Those were horrific, 50 million people.
And they killed them too.
We're talking about almost 1 billion now. And so at a time when we have almost 1 billion people that could be starving to death, shouldn't we be trying to get as much food as possible out? We would try to do everything we can. But in Holland, they've gone and shut down the farms. They've taken over, they're trying to take over their land, and they want to take over the farms and stop them from growing not just food, but also raising cattle and meat. And so now it's massive protests are happening in Holland at a time where we need more food. In the United States, the farmers are being paid not to plant. They're not allowed to plant on some of their land. And they went and they petitioned the Secretary of Agriculture and said, hey, let us plant. We can get more food. And they said, no, it's not in line with our agreement for the Paris Accord.
The Paris Accord.
It's just the environmental thing.
Which is the environmental thing, which is what President Trump had pulled us out of. And then Biden's very first day in office, the most important thing he had to do by executive order was put us back into the Paris Accord. So we can't grow food in the United States because of, climate change. Holland can't grow food. And now the protests are happening all over the world. And it's even bigger. So like in all throughout Europe, there's an energy crisis going on. Everybody should know that by now. I've been talking about it for 2 years. And they don't have natural gas. They're dependent on Russia for natural gas. But we need natural gas in Europe to make fertilizer. And we need fertilizer to grow food. We also need natural gas to process food.
Okay, what are the three things that the kitchen service said?
So food, points. And then the next one is the energy.
And the next one is?
And then the money.
Right, and that's what Records is talking about.
Yeah.